Good morning, Vietnam! Welcome, everybody, to the Writers Event on Colorworld Live. I'm excited because this is the first panel ever that I am not your host. In fact, it's so hard to remember which way is the person next to me.
No.
The person next to me. Sam is going to be the host. Sam has been part of the Colorworld family forever. You found us in year one, right, Sam?
2014, October. Yeah.
Man, that was the first ever shows that we ever did.
Yeah.
Rob, welcome. Esther, welcome. Dio, welcome. Hello to you, beautiful people. I appreciate that. Russell has eluded me across America. Oftentimes, we've been in the same room, and the life of being at shows is just crazy. Lance, my favorite arch rival we've ever had, he did our first show ever straight across from us at Salt Lake FanX, and he whooped our ass at selling books. And I have made I've made it my goal ever since to befriend this book maven, this seller of books, this teller of tales. So this is a very exciting panel for me. Sam is a reader through and through. I am a movie guy. I am here to get the Colorworld books turned into movies so that fans don't go, this sucks. It's not like the book. That's my whole job in life, is to take the book and to turn it into a movie that I don't have to hear how much not like the book it is. So
I'm one of those people.
Are you? You're like,
yeah.
Okay, so that's my job. But until then, Sam is the reader. She knows what is up. She writes a book blog of all things bookish. So Sam, thank you so much for sitting in my chair this week. I'm going to get out of your way. Without further ado, the writers.
Oh boy. Hello, world. All right, I'm going to start with a weird, fun question, and that is, what is the funniest typo you've ever done?
Funniest typo?
Yes.
God, that's hard. I just was editing a book this morning, and I saw like 3 of them that were like really funny. I can't think of one now, though. You have one, Lance?
Do spoken typos count? Because I got a doozy.
Sure, go for it.
Do you ever have one of those moments where you are speaking but also looking around, and then your eyes land on a word and you speak that word? Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, yeah.
That has happened to me. There was one time...
No.
I can't believe I'm telling this story. Actually, this was horrible. But I was doing a school presentation, so I'm in front of a classroom of 7th graders, right? And I am speaking, and I am making a comparison to Harry Potter, right? How everybody wants, Harry to beat that fat Dudley. And what I meant to say was Dudley. But at the moment that I was saying that, scanning the room, my eyes hit, in big letters at the back of the room, was the teacher's name, Durfee. So I said, we want him to beat that fat Durfee. She was pregnant.
Oh.
At the time.
Oh my gosh.
That may have been, I tried. I tried to walk away at that moment. I literally tried, I can't come back from this. Thank you all for having me. I tried to walk out. She insisted, no, stay. I'm like, I don't know if I can continue. But that was, I don't know if that actually counts as a typo, but holy smokes.
It's certainly a fun story.
Oh, man, that hurt my soul more than a little.
I have one that wasn't a typo. That was an actual thing that I intended to do. That was horrible. I wrote a book. My first book was called The Wannabes. It was about fake superheroes that get real superpowers. And one of the main characters' names was Flick. It was a comic book, and when you write Flick in comic book, the I inside a word does not have the crossbars. So it was FLICK, and the kerning is very close together in like all through the book, like literally like the whole book, like just says like Flick for like, I don't know, I think it was only an 8-page preview. Must have said it like 20 times. And it wasn't until we had it like on the floor of a show that someone finally noticed. And I have no idea how many I gave out, which said like not a very good word in a kid's book.
That's rough.
Cool. Yeah. I honestly, like, you stumped me, Sam. I mean, should you know? You do my copy editing.
Yeah, no. Most of the errors I caught was Colorworld, so it was before I joined.
Yeah, I honestly, like, nothing is coming to mind as far as like a humorous typo. Yeah, I mean, not in my books or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think yours was mostly like homonym issues. Like you confused heroin and like heroin a woman hero and heroin a drug.
Okay, that's kind of funny. Heroin versus heroin.
Yeah, that was in the Colorworld, I think.
Different spelling. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Definitely want to stick with heroines and not heroin.
Yes, absolutely. So, all right. Okay. So, what is the most difficult thing about writing characters that are completely different from you, like a different gender, different religion, different personality, etc.?
Nobody speak at once. I never even thought about that until I wrote Ezra's book, in which it was told from a teenage boy's point of view. But I had like a blast. It is so fun being in the head of a teenage boy, like so fun. And honestly, like if I could write a whole series of like being in the head of a teenage boy, a snarky teenage boy at that, I would probably do it. But before I wrote him, I sought out like lots of advice on like how do I do this thing, because I'm not a boy and I'm not a teenage boy. And the advice is just like just write the character. Like you don't need to pay attention to like what gender they are. They're people. And then, you know, of course, like not trying to get too complicated with the language to make sure like it sounded like it came from a teenage boy and not like a 30-year-old boy. So I don't know. That's my experience. I have had a lot of fun, and all of my recent books have been other characters that are not me, representative of me at all. And I really enjoyed being able to like play somebody else for 100,000 words.
I'll admit, I don't usually have problems with that because virtually all of my characters are based in one way or another on real people. So I just try to write that person. I imagine I can think of characters that would be very difficult for me to write because I don't know anybody like that well enough to actually write that. And I just had this epiphany of my own laziness. I don't write those characters. If I don't know somebody well enough to write that character, I don't write that kind of character. But I feel like I've known enough really colorful people, lots of psychopaths and wackadoodles and generous people and evil people, and like I feel like I have a fair palette to pull from, but I do realize I don't paint with my missing colors.
Yeah, and I don't like writing men at all. Like they all sound like me when I write men. Like writing women allows me to like take understand that person is not me in a way. So like guys all start sounding like me over time. And so like writing women or writing people that are not like me are an easy way for me to like make that character three-dimensional because it no longer has any resemblance to who I am. But on the other hand, like I think it's very hard to believe that someone can write 100,000-word book or a series of books without some part of them being in most of the characters, because writing a book is very long and it's very, very hard, and it requires so much thought and effort and time spent in those people's heads. I don't know. I've sometimes oftentimes when I meet an author that I have read and then I've read their book, or especially when I meet them and then I read their book, I'm like, oh, like this is totally you. Like this is totally you in this way or in this aspect of a book. And sometimes it takes years for me to realize, like rereading my friend Walter Oskley's book, Cubicles. And I didn't know him that well when I got the book and when I read it, but I've known him and his wife now for years. And when I reread it recently, I was like, oh, like this is just like you're telling like a love story between you and your wife, and like this is totally like how you interact all together. And he's like, yeah, I didn't realize that till about 3 years after I wrote this thing, when people started telling me, but absolutely.
Nice. Okay. Okay, so this is actually going to go back to the typo problem, but what's your preferred font to write in? Times
New Roman 12, double spaced, and then I reformat it when I send it when I format the book for print.
Okay.
And on 11. I couldn't even tell you why. Sorry, that's the end of it.
I mean, it works. Did we lose Rachel? I think she froze.
Either that, or she is really just focused.
I think we lost
Rachel. Conversation.
I will say that there is a lot of evidence that writing in not Wingding, the one that no one likes, the Comic Sans is the best. Is the best font to write in, and you get the most. You're the most productive when you write in that font. I don't know why. No one knows why, but like
I've never tried
there's multiple studies, and multiple friends of mine have tried writing it in Comic Sans, not believing the study that came out about it, and all of them have been like, I hate myself, but like it was the best font. Like it's the best one.
I tend to write in Bookman old style.
That's a good one. I like to format in Bookman old style.
Yeah. So.
Ooh, also Book Antigua.
Also a good one, yes. I like those ones. So, okay, so does writing energize you or exhaust you?
Hey.
Hi. Yeah, I was
hey.
saying anybody. I was like, this is not working. So,
does writing excite you or drain you?
Excite me. Fills my tank. Gets me going. Yeah, all of that.
I would say it drains one, fills the other.
Okay.
Because I will actually fill up, like it literally feels like my brain fills with ideas to the point where it's almost like vibrating a little bit, and I got to go write it down. But as that tank lowers, my desire for blistering manual labor increases. It is not uncommon for me to go out and like chop down a tree or dig a ditch or something after writing, because I need blisters on my hands. I need physical activity after writing. So I wouldn't quite call that energizing, since mentally I'm often quite drained. But no, the desire to go out and throw some boulder or something becomes quite powerful.
Okay, Sadavir, got it.
So I think both.
Right?
Like I'm often very drained at the end of writing a day, but I deal with severe depression, and so it is my release valve for that. I literally can't not write for more than like 2 or 3 days before like it gets very dark. So it is more a compulsion than anything. I don't know if it's like if it's draining or exciting. It's both, but the compulsion is what I every time I take more than a couple of days off from writing, it does not go well for me mentally. So I will say both.
Okay, makes sense. What are two of your favorite book covers that are not your own? Sorry, Rachel, yours are amazing, but you can't count them.
Oh, I have one. That's really great. And I'm so mad at this book. It just came up.
Okay.
A Kingdom of Exiles. Have you guys seen this book cover? It is friggin' gorgeous. And the book is like, I don't know, 800 pages long. And it's like wonderful and detailed. And like everything about it is great, except that it ends on a cliffhanger and there's no second book planned, it looks like.
No.
So that's one. I have to think on the second one, but for sure that's one that like I keep thinking about still after having read that book earlier this year.
Well, I would pick. This is like kind of funny because it's similar to my book cover. Is Divergent. I love the cover of Divergent. It may just be because I love trees. Like I have just a fixation with like trees. Brad's like trying to look it up right now, but all he's seeing is the movie. I'm like, no, it's that one, Insurgent. I guess it's the second one, Insurgent. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the font is great, like the sort of silhouette in the background is great. I love the tree sort of disintegrating and like just like super cool. I love it.
That is a cool cover.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'll admit, what I really love in a book cover are those old leather bound embossed, like not even anything on there, just the beautiful book. I love those so much.
Have you seen the 10th anniversary edition for Brandon Sanderson's Way of Kings?
Oh, I entered that. Oh my goodness.
Okay. Oh,
If
it's going to be
anyone out
worth
there-
that $200.
My birthday's coming up. Somebody, please.
Right.
I could not justify that kind of expense for myself, but hurts my heart. I really want it. Way of Kings was amazing.
Yeah, great book. But they're going to make it all like leather bound. There it is. Yeah. It's going to be freaking great. Look at that. Like, come on.
Magnificent.
Oh, yeah. So. Okay. Anyone think of a second one they like?
I do. I have one.
Okay,
So I'll since I'm from comics, I'll do a comic one. And my favorite comic of all time is a book called Serenity Rose by my friend Aaron Alexovich. And it has such a fun, cool, like monstery, like vibrant cover. He actually does the covers for our Cthulhu is Hard to Spell series too. But yeah, Serenity Rose.
I think I've heard of that one.
It's the second, the next cover over. No, that one, they're all great, but I'm talking about that specific cover.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. I like that one.
Yeah. No, I'm like seeing it cover in my head, but I can't remember the name of it. I don't know. Lance, you got anything else?
You know, oddly enough, the only one coming to mind, it's more of a nostalgic thing, but Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein.
That's classic.
Yeah. That is a great cover.
Really almost any of the Shel Silverstein. Those were awesome. Yep, there it is. There it is. That I feel like that speaks to me. Like, I am the kid who would walk to the end of the sidewalk and look over. Because, you know, what's on the other side, right? You got to know.
Yeah, you do have to know. So how do you guys come up with your character names? Go for it, Lance.
Jump in on this one. I've always said that all of my character names are meaningful to me in some way. Now, I cannot always explain what those reasons are. Sometimes they are too personal. Sometimes they are too confusing or convoluted. Or sometimes they would actually give away a major part of the story. There's a character in The Price of Nobility that if you knew where I got his name from, it would give away a major plot twist just by knowing where I got that guy's name from. But there are a couple examples that I probably could give here. In my first book, The Price of Creation, there is a a moment where this family has this child. There is a symbol that he is going to be a force of great destruction. And so the father ends up naming his child in front of a mob that has come to kill the baby. And he sees the kind of hatred and frustration that his son is going to have to grow up facing. And he names his son in that moment Sadavir. That is an East Indian name that means courage. Okay, so he named his son Courage. That's not in the book. You don't have to understand that to enjoy it. But that was for me, right? Every single time I typed that name, I was reminded his father named him Courage. He would have grown up knowing that that is who he was meant to be. That is what his family expected of him.
Knowing that, I think I can see that running through the whole book.
Yep.
He definitely lives up to that name.
I did wonder about the name, Sadavir. I definitely was like,
That's
I
cool.
was wondering, because everybody else seems to have pretty normal sounding names. At least the more important characters in the book do. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Well, there's some subtlety there. Actually, virtually all of the destroyers actually have Russian names. All of the creators have Indian names, with the exception of Arik and Luria, which are based off other things, but also it kind of reinforces this that they are a little bit different, right? They are separated. But the rest of them, you can actually go through, you could probably look up what those names mean, and you'd find them. The main villain in that one, Sadhan, that name means wealth and speaks to his motivations and goals. But again, that's all for me.
Nice.
I do a very small part of that where I will take like a different a race, or so a large percentage of my characters are mythological, so like they have their names given to them already, like their names are already out there, and then certain mythological creatures originate from a place, and so then they get names that are from that place, whether it's Ireland or Chad, or wherever it is. So it kind of feels like cohesive. But the characters who don't have those two things going for them, I tend to not start a book until I have all of the characters, like the main characters, named and put out there. So I just kind of think on it until the name pops up, or usually what happens is there'll be an idea that like shoots into me, and I know that I want to make that book, and then a character name will come with it.
Okay. Interesting. All right, so let's get into when it comes to the writing process. Do you have to plan and map out the whole story before you start writing, or do you just kind of fly by the seat of your pants and write what the characters want to do?
I do not plan out my books, like, at all. I saw, like, I read an article once about, like, different, it basically showed snapshots of storyboards from different famous books that the author had written out. The most impressive one being J.K. Rowling in her series, and I was just like, whoa. Like, that is some serious planning. I don't know that I could actually do that. I'd have to like make an experiment to see if I could actually write out an entire book before I write it. But the best I have is like, I'm gonna have this character and this is what they're gonna do in the story, like this one thing. And then I write the story around that one thing that they're gonna do. That's the best I got as far as planning.
Nice.
This is actually one of the more common questions I get as I go around and talk to people, and I say there's a spectrum, right? There's the plotters that plan out everything, and you have the pantsers who plan out nothing. And what I usually say is both extremes tend to have their issues, and you want to try to find something in the middle. I'm probably a little bit more on the pantser side with Rachel, though my books are very character-centric. So what I do when I start out is I have my characters, I call them their moments of truth. These are key character development moments right? Here's where they, meet the love interest. Here's where they get their butt kicked by the villain. Here's where they go on the quest for the magic duck or something. And here's where they go back and rescue the princess or kill the princess, depending on what kind of story you're writing, right? And I have those moments planned out, those scenes that just live in my mind. I don't plan out the stuff in between. And so I do have kind of a skeleton, if you will, a vague shape to the story based around the character. Everything in between there, a lot of your magic building, a lot of your other characters, that I generally just kind of let flow. See where it goes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I used to pants everything, and it would take me about a year to write a book. It takes me I just finished my last book in about 6 weeks because I plotted the whole thing out. I plot every 1,000 words. And then every 10,000 words, there'll be like a big reveal and like a big plot point. And then every like 6,000 to 5,000 to 6,000 words, there'll be some other sort of pretty interesting plot point that needs to be hit. And I allow myself to maneuver around between the plot points, but the plot points have to be hit every time. And that's allowed me to go from about 1,000 to 2,000 words a day to about 5,000 plus words a day. Also, I spend about 2 years developing a world before I start writing in it. So at least 1 year, between 1 and 2 years, writing whatever whatever like universe I'm in. And I learned that from a book I wrote called The Vessel. So there was it was quite a complicated dystopian, and I found that the more I was able to like dig in and really build out how the geopolitical and sociopolitical structure worked, the better it was going to be. So I tend to, when I have a good idea, sit on it for about 2 years, and then and spend that time sort of developing everything, and then I can, I kind of have a bones and a structure and how the whole universe operates, and that's when I sort of can write stuff. But it's very hard for me thinking that I can keep everything straight for like a 16-book series or a 7-book series or a 10-book series without having the structure in place and being able to go back in the outline stage and make sure that everything's right instead of having to make sure that everything's right while I'm actually writing it.
Okay.
I feel that, but I do that like on the back end. Like when I'm writing, I will write down. I have notebooks and notebooks and notebooks and notebooks and notebooks of like things. I have master timeline. But that always comes after the fact so that I don't forget those details. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to put this somewhere so that when I write again, I know like not to violate this thing that I've already established or whatever. So I don't. Does anybody write without writing something down on the side? Like,
I don't write anything down on the side once I start writing. Like I just did 5 drafts of this one book, and I have like 5 notes from it. This is all the notes that I took over 5 drafts of that book once I started writing it.
Oh, goodness.
So it was like 6 things, but that's because I spend a whole lot of time going back and rereading the books before I start the new one, because I don't like stopping in the middle of it's so hard for me to get into the flow that when I get into it, I just want to like be there in the moment.
yes.
But I mean, that's where personal preference comes in, right? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. I spend a lot of time at work thinking about what I want to write, and then when I get home, I can just write it down. So it's kind of like I'm planning, but it's all in my head.
I don't know. I feel like I can't write anything or come up with ideas unless I'm sitting in front of a computer screen with like the keys in front of me. You know, like
the shower is like the best place for ideas, though.
Oh, no, can't do it in the shower. Nowhere. Like I have to. The palette has to be. The blank canvas has to be right there in front of me, staring me in the face. And sometimes I sit down to my laptop knowing that I'm not going to write anything, but I just have it open. So I like get my brain like moving, and so then like that's when I have my laptop open. Nothing's happening there, but I've got like my notebook where I'm like making notes about like what I might want to write when I finally work myself up to it. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and the structure that I learned is from a post on Ghostwoods about how to write a book in 3 days. And so, like, I was literally like pantsing everything until I found that structure. And for some reason, it like resonated with me. I think it's just like if you go to ghostwoods.com, it's their 404 page now. But it was really powerful for me to like see that. And it unlocked how I could like write enough to have a career doing it and like release enough in a year to like feel like I was being as productive as I wanted to be.
Okay. So then, do any of you believe in writer's block? And if so, how do you deal with it?
Well, I'm sure that it's a thing. My problems are usually like, I don't think like, oh, what am I gonna do in the story? Like, what's gonna happen in the story? I don't ever have that problem. My problem, like, is always having to fit, like you said, Russell, when you write like a 10-book series and you have to like keep your story in line with everything else that's been written in that series, like to me is the hardest part because the window of possibility narrows so much that it makes it really hard to write. I hate the word, but I'm going to say it anyway, organically, where it just sort of like falls out on the page. Whereas if I were to sit down and write like a new series, I wouldn't have any problem. It would just come. And because there's no rules, there's no like, oh, it has to fit in this thing and go along with what happened in this other book and what happened in this character and that. But with multiple books, and I'm like at book 9, I think, in the series, it's like it is extremely hard to write because I have to keep in mind so many limiting factors, and that, like, to me, that's where the writer's block comes. Is like, okay, how can I do this in a way that's gonna, and I will come up with 10 ideas, and I'll try each one of them, and one of them will work, and the rest of them will get thrown out. I might have written like 5 chapters of each idea, and none of them worked. I wrote them out, I had to see how it felt. I erased them, and then I tried the next idea, and it worked. And I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. And then I go on to the next roadblock. And so that's where the roadblocks are. It's like making it work with everything else.
I've generally said that there are 2 primary types of writer's block. The first and most common type stems from a desire for perfection. Right? You know generally what you want to say, but you just don't know how to say it just right, and so people end up just stuck staring at a blank screen. And for them, I usually say I have some very strange advice. Give up. And now, I do not mean give up on writing. I mean give up on trying to be perfect. Write it however you want. Write it like crap. Write the recipe for biscuits. I don't care. Just write something. Because I've never come up with my great idea while writing. Oh, sorry. While staring at a blank screen, I come up with my best ideas while I'm writing. And so you just jump in and you start writing. And you might think, I've written, 6 books now? Here, hold on. All right, so this one, Price of Survival, in the first 2 drafts of that book, there was a sentence in there that literally said, and I quote, "I'm not good at transitions, they're in a battle now." All right? I didn't know how to get the characters from here to here.
That's so lame.
But if I just stared at it, I'd probably still be staring at it. And so I just wrote, "I'm not good at transitions, they're in a battle now. And the fires of the burning magnesium lit up the sky like noonday." And away I go, right? And yeah, it wasn't until the 3rd draft I had my moment, right? I'm like, oh, wait, this still needs to happen. This, they connected to one of my better transitions. I'm really not that good at transitions, but no, I would say for the most common type of writer's block, again, that stems from that desire for perfection, give up. Just write something, right? Give up on trying to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect on your first draft. It's not supposed to be perfect on your first draft. I've often said if your first draft looks good, you did it wrong. Okay, first draft should just be a brain barf, just bleh, right? Chunks of story flying about the page. And I think a lot of writers get stuck at that point because they really do try to make their first 3 chapters perfect. I think a lot of people listening could probably relate to that, trying to make their first 3 chapters perfect. And 3 chapters is all they ever do.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I've taken up a bit too much time. I don't know if we want to go into the second type of writer's block. All right. Second type of writer's block is when you are well and truly stuck. You have written yourself into a corner and you are legitimately out of ideas. At least in my experience, this isn't actually very common. Most people can, figure their way out of stuff. But it does happen occasionally. And for that, I go to a member of my inner circle. These are my alpha readers. These are my trusted confidants. People should never write by committee. The number of people that you should trust enough to actually change your writing based on their opinion, that number should fit on one hand or less. That should be a small number. When I'm well and truly stuck, I go to one of those people. I say, okay, I've got these characters in this kind of situation. How would you handle it? And they give me their ideas. Now, I do not use their ideas. That is not the point of the exercise. Because they give me their ideas, and I, of course, shoot them down. Right? Oh, that wouldn't work because of this. That wouldn't work because of this. But, I could do this. Right? And just the process of seeing it through someone else's eyes from that different perspective has never failed for me to jumpstart my brain. I always leave those conversations with new ideas of my own. And I'm back to writing.
Awesome.
So I agree with those two, but there's a third one, I think. The other part, for me, there's a third part of writer's block, and it's like you don't actually like the idea and shouldn't be writing it. Like, I don't think people give that enough credence. Like, people write books that they shouldn't be writing all the time because they have too much, like, sunk cost into it or sunk time into it or whatever. They're in the middle of a series and, like, they just don't like it. Or maybe, honestly, like, they don't understand the genre or the thing, or they thought they were going to be really interested in this character and they end up hating them. And, we always talk about, like, move on to the end, but I have given up on so many books in my life, like so many. Like, for every book that's back there, there's 10 that I've said, oh, yeah, I don't like that. I'm just going to stop. And you kind of have to get to your body between whether it's one of the 2 things that Lance was talking about or the third, and quite common one of, like, you just should give up and, like, write something else that, like, you like more. In fact, I often think that people write their if you've read the creative career book, I talk about not doing your dream project first. And I guess that's a fourth kind where it's like, you want to write epic fantasy and you want to be the next Brandon Sanderson. But your skill is not to the level of being able to write that book yet. And so you keep trying to write this book that is like Brandon Sanderson's book, but you literally just do not have the experience. You don't have the reps to do it. And so you stop realizing that. And one of my favorite things to tell people is, like, go write in a genre that you like but don't love. Just, like, go write a book that's like a thriller if you like fantasy, or a romance if you like mystery, or something that you enjoy but don't enjoy so much that it becomes like your North Star. And that gives you the reps. That teaches you something about, like, a different genre that you didn't know. And because you just don't care about that genre as much as the genre you love, you don't sort of have the same perfectionist tendencies that you do when trying to write sort of the thing that is deepest in your heart.
Interesting.
I actually had, sorry, I brought this up as an example of what you were talking about. I was about halfway through the first draft of this book, and I was bored. I just didn't want to write, and I realized it's because I didn't like the story. I had this whole plan. It was going to be this complex kind of, almost like a political drama with fantasy in it, right? It was this great idea. What was showing up in the book was boring. I don't mean a little bit boring. I mean, it was unreadable. I imagine everybody here knows what the Control A on the keyboard does. That is the select all command and delete. It wasn't quite as satisfying. If I'd had an actual paper copy, I would have thrown it in the fire and watched it burn, right? That would have been cathartic. But no, all I had was the Control A and delete, just wiped out the whole dang thing. Because you're right. Sometimes you're just like, this is not worth continuing. This is not worth letting my readers see. And yeah, that's the... there it is. But yeah, this was one where no one ever saw the first half of the first draft. It's gone. It was horrible. Now I actually quite like this one. But yeah, it was a very, very different book from what I actually started with. And so, yeah, I would never have considered that writer's block. But yeah, now that you mention it, yeah, that was just not a book I ever would have put my name on.
Yeah, that's I definitely agree with that. I certainly, deleting is one of my favorite things in editing. I don't consider that writer's block either, I guess, because I always know I never sit there for very long. I'm always like, this is getting really boring. I'm clearly not writing the right story, so I just need to delete. I need to go back to where I enjoyed it. So I delete everything that I wrote, back to where I enjoyed it, and then just rewrite that again. But then Russell was talking about writing outside of your genre, and I totally agree with that. Colorworld's the first novel that I wrote, but prior to actually publishing Colorworld, I wrote a series of nonfiction essays. I took a class in nonfiction, creative nonfiction, and I wrote a whole bunch of essays that everybody loves. My mom loved them, my aunt loved them, but I didn't. I mean, they were okay, but it wasn't what I wanted to write. But it was the process of what it takes to actually write creative nonfiction that made me a better fiction writer. And like that, I think, was like the biggest thing that helped me aim Colorworld in the right place and get it where it was like a meaty story and not just like, I don't know, superficial or yeah. Because Colorworld basically got rewritten after that. Like I had written it, then I went back and took a bunch of classes, wrote a bunch of essays, and went back and deleted it, rewritten the whole story. So
Nice. All right. So do you think it's more important to have strong characters, a strong plot, or a strong setting?
Characters.
Characters.
That is like such an easy question. Good job.
People connect with people.
They do.
Okay, that is fundamental. I have preached this in so many ways and so many times. I will just say this to all the writers out there. I'll get all dramatic. How about this? If you have missed the human element of your stories, you've missed everything. How was that?
That was beautifully dramatic. I like
that
it.
word? Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I was going for dramatic.
Okay, yeah. So do you guys have a place where you keep your potential story ideas? Like, do you have like a binder collection or a collection of Post-it notes, or where do you keep your ideas that you aren't able to write yet?
I have a folder. I have a folder with all of my projects. There's one that says active, which are ones that have been finished and I'm actively promoting now. I have ones that say develop, and then I have one that says inactive. But more importantly, like usually something has to do a lot to get into that inactive folder. Like I don't write ideas down. I think that like if a good idea is a good idea, that's going to like stand the test of time. It is going to keep coming back again and again and again and again and again until like I have no choice but to write it. Sometimes I do have the flash in the pan idea that is just so good that I'm like, oh my God, that's got to be the next project. But usually what happens is I go back into that inactive folder and I'm like, well, these 10 things kept coming back up. What if I smash all them together and I like make this new thing? And then like that's most of my books are smashing together 10 mediocre or pretty good ideas mixed with like one little spark of genius.
Nice.
yeah, the whole reason I only have one series, I don't know if people know this, but the only reason I continue to write in the Colorworld series is because every other book that I've started to write got sucked into Colorworld. So like every time I try to write another book, I'm like, oh, but I can put this in Colorworld, and then it just goes in there.
Nice.
So that's where all my ideas are. They're actually in Colorworld. So
That's so funny because that is what I'm doing with my new series. I have this new series, and I was like, I'm just going to write a really long series, and no matter what idea I come up with, I'm just going to find a way to like move it into this series. And I've only, since I started writing this new series, had one idea that I'm like, no, that's good enough to have its own thing.
These are what I call my sticky ideas. Because people ask me where I come up with my ideas, they misunderstand. Coming up with new ideas is not my problem. Getting my brain to shut up so I can sleep, that's my problem. Happened recently. I was going to bed about 10 o'clock. I'm like, I'm gonna get a good night's sleep, and my brain went, or we could think about cold fusion for 4 hours. At 2 in the morning, I'm like, how would it affect the economy? So yeah, 1,000 new ideas a day. Almost literally everything I see is new ideas. But yeah, my specific strategy is forgetting about them. One comes in, another one leaves, and I just let them flow. Yeah, like Russell was saying, there are ideas that get stuck, right? They don't leave like the others. And then other ideas come in and actually stick to them. And pretty soon you end up with this kind of like a log jam almost, right? Of ideas that now have coalesced into an entire story. And like Russell was saying, now you have to write it, right? Because it's stuck in there, right? You got to do something about it.
Okay. So how many unpublished or half-finished stories do you guys have just sitting around?
they're all in Colorworld.
Oh God, that's so much less than me. Hundreds, like I don't know, thousands. I write movies and TV too, and so there's a ton of scripts that I have laying around, comics that don't have a good place, and stories that. So this is a thing that just happened, maybe 3 months ago, is I really was like, oh, that's what kind of stories I want to write. I've written 19 novels now, 19 books, hundreds of stories. And I just recently realized that, I just don't want to write sci-fi. I'm not going to write thrillers ever. I'm just never going to write a thriller. Maybe I write a fantasy thriller. A lot of my books are fantasy thrillers, but it took me 10 years of writing or 15 years of writing to know the kind of books that I've written. And I also have done dystopian and mystery and sci-fi and all sorts of stuff that are out there right now. But, it literally COVID taught me the kind of books that I should be writing and the kind of thing that I should be drawn to. So until recently, I had all sorts of stories that I thought I was going to write and that I wanted to write, or really because it come from movies and TV, an idea is all you need most of the time, to start a script or to start a producer or start my management team, working on something is to be what if we did this? And you don't really have to be the guy who does that. You just have to be well, that's a pretty interesting idea. Go and let's try and put some stuff to that. And so for a long time, I had a lot of ideas, but now I do tend to do what Rachel does and smash ideas into my main series.
Okay. I have lots of So do you have stories that you started writing? You have that many? You have thousands of stories you started writing, but never.
I have hundreds of stories I've started writing, or have written to first draft, or have written a piece of. And then just said, I don't like this. I don't like this thing that I've made.
I have lots of. I always tell people, because I don't know if you guys do conventions, how many people come up to you and you're like, I have a story idea for you, and you're like, great. But I'm I have plenty of story ideas. What I don't have is time to write all of those ideas. So I have stories that I want to write that I haven't written because I'm afraid they're going to get sucked into Colorworld, but still, I have other ideas. And one day, when Colorworld is done, I'll just do some other stories. But I don't think I have anything that's literally written out that's just sitting there.
In fact, a lot of my books actually come from old scripts that I have just laying around that I re-smash together in some other weird way. But yeah, it's crazy to hear that like people don't have like a million stories that they've written and just abandoned. I'm a huge fan of abandoning
I have
stuff.
hundreds. Yeah.
Oh, I know. I can't abandon it. That's good. If I liked it enough to start writing it, like I don't want to let it go. It's got to go somewhere. So.
I know, but so don't you find that sometimes you just like writing a story and you're like, oh, yeah, I don't like this. Like, I don't like this world. Like, I don't like this genre. Like, I'm bored by like the conventions that I came up with. Like, I'm just done. Just done. Just done.
Kill it, start over.
Yeah, no, I don't. Okay, so one of the stories I wrote was very kind of similar to Price of Creation Land. So it's fantasy, and there's like a whole world that I developed, and I probably wrote like 20 chapters of it. But the idea of the story, not the world, but the idea that I was trying to get across in that story, I ended up putting in Colorworld. So yeah, like I left all of like the scene and everything behind, but I took like the idea and then I put that just in a different setting. So yeah, now I just smash it all together. What can I say? I don't know.
It's very efficient.
I just can't let it go. So yeah, I like it, and if I don't like it, I never actually sat down to write it to begin with. There's plenty of things like stories in Colorworld that I've started to write in the series that I've abandoned because like I'm like, this isn't a good idea. This is boring. I don't like this. I almost did that with one of my books that I just published like 2 years ago, Charlotte. I really didn't like the character. I really didn't like, but I loved the things that she was discovering in the story, so I ended up keeping it. And I was so afraid when I published it that like everybody was going to hate it because I really didn't like her as a character. But then people ended up really liking it.
It's great.
So, you know, going back to what we were talking about, how like if you don't write it, if you don't like it, then don't write it. That is one of the stories that I persevered through, like really just disliking the character and her life and her choices. And I kept the story anyway, and I just like forced myself to finish it. That actually turned out pretty okay. So
Great.
you know,
Awesome.
worth mentioning, I guess, that sometimes you just have to like, sometimes writing is work, you know, and you just have like, just like I was saying, like my problem is like making sure everything lines up. A lot of that is work, and I don't enjoy that part. But if every time something frustrated me or like this one little part is boring or whatever, it's not necessarily means that you trash it, but it may just mean that like you just have to work a little bit harder or like try to come at it from a different approach, particularly if it's important to the story. And for me, because it's a series, a lot of things are important to the series that have to be told, but I don't necessarily love writing them. Charlotte was one of those stories that I just didn't enjoy her character. So, yeah.
Nice.
I don't know if any of you have that experience where, like, you've written a character, you're just like, but this is the character that needs to tell the story.
I got rid of it and started over. If I don't like the character, I usually just get rid of him.
Well, the main character of my, like the biggest, like the crux of the universe of the Godsverse Chronicles is this character named Katrina, and I hate her. Hey, she's like the worst. She's like awful. She's like brash and hot-headed and mean, and she never takes anyone else's advice. But like, she's just so endearing to people, and there's just something about her that people just gravitate towards constantly. But like every time she's in a book, every time she has a chapter, because a lot of my books are told from multiple main character points of view, every time she has a chapter, every time she's even in a piece of a chapter, it sucks all of the air out of the room, and like everything is just all about her. But I also like, I hate writing her, but I love writing her too, because she's like the conduit for like,
She seems like an outlet, like such a great outlet. Like, just like reading her, I was just like, man, I bet she was just so funny, so fun to just like fire off whatever the heck you wanted to say that day.
Yeah, but she's so mean. She's so mean, and I'm not mean. And like, she's so like the second book in the Godsverse Chronicles is from a different character's point of view, and then like she gets the comment on the things that Katrina did in the first book, and like so that was like my like. I understand that like this is not how a human being should act. It's just this person happened to do that, and also. She never fails. So she like always, every book, every story, she like becomes ridiculously overpowered from the previous story. And like, eventually you just I hit this conclusion. I was like, well, I literally don't know what else to do with this character. She is as powerful as any being in a universe could possibly be. And where do I even go from here?
It sounds like Dragon Ball Z.
Yes.
You just wrote Vegeta, but female.
Yeah. It's. I mean, like, I love Katrina. She's just problematic to like be the person who like. I don't want anyone to emulate her. Like, I feel like she would be the person out front of the no masks. So like, I'm like. Also, I need her to be self-aware that like she like does these bad things.
Yeah.
All right, so. How do you guys get your creativity flowing?
Real life experiences. I really like to do things, make things. You know, I was stuck in COVID. Hold on. I made this knife.
Nice.
Just out of like stuff I found in my garage, and it's just like, you know, as I have experiences, I then want to like have characters do that, and you know they get the blisters and they have the experiences, or they get their heart broken, all this sort of stuff. Like I've always felt that your most powerful writing is your most personal writing. So I've always felt like the more experiences I have, the more it kind of like lights up all the synapses, and I feel like writing again. So yeah, that's probably what gets my juices flowing the most, is just real life doing stuff.
Thanks.
I believe that like writing is breathing out and reading is breathing in. So I get most of my inspiration from reading and consuming things. Like it can be experiences, because like I go on a lot of my travels have made it into books. But I would say most of the writing, when I feel like empty or like bereft of an idea, I find that it's been like a week or a couple of days or sometimes hours since I've read anything. And so I have to like keep that well full in order to be able to drain it. And like I write many books a year and many projects a year. So like I have to read a lot to like keep that coffer full so my brain can make interesting connections so that I can then write my own stuff.
I have two things. One is that I need like runway. So I have 5 kids, and we run this business, which involves a lot more than just books. And so I have to have some like separation from all of the demands, because I literally do have 2 brains. One is get crap done brain, and then the other one is creative brain. And creative brain does not play well with get crap done brain. If I have a number of things to do and I'm like focused on like getting things done, like my creative brain is completely turned off. That's why I can't come up with ideas if I'm like working at making masks or metal, or I'm working conventions or whatever. So I require like some time to sort of like get my brain out of gear of like get crap done and let my creative brain like have a voice and start thinking. And so a lot of time that requires nighttime when everybody's asleep and there's no like immediate demands on my time. So I definitely need that particular environment. But then the other thing is I was thinking, what do I consume that helps me write? And I remembered, I think it was Hemingway who said, whatever genre it is that you want to write, you read the opposite, whatever you consider the opposite genre. So I want to write fiction, and I love writing fiction, but I read nonfiction. So not creative nonfiction, but like I like social science. Social science is like my favorite subject, and I love Malcolm Gladwell, and I read everything that he writes. And so I read a lot of nonfiction, And so that's where I honestly get a lot of ideas from. Social science goes into my book series. So those are the two things I think that I rely on the most.
Awesome.
I never really thought of it that way, but yeah, I read a ridiculous amount of history. Though I don't consider that the opposite of fantasy in any way, but yeah, I could see actually some of that.
All right. Well, we're actually out of time for the free public panel. We'll take a little break and then we'll jump on for the VIP where we will be asking all of you guys' questions. And don't forget, there's still time to book a hangout until the end of this event. So you can still get time with Rachel, Lance, or Russell and talk to them one-on-one and ask whatever questions you have there. All right, guys. We'll see you in a little bit for VIP.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
All right, and then end broadcast.